Ladies and gentlemen, the glass ceiling has been a central focus in this year's US presidential election, and in Trump 2.0, after Susie Wiles, it has been broken once again by the new Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Donald Trump has picked the former Democrat as his DNI, making her the first Hindu congresswoman to lead 18 spy agencies of the United States and be Trump's intelligence advisor. On his social media platform Truth Social, Trump said that Tulsi Gabbard would bring her fearless spirit into the intelligence community. Talking about fearlessness, let me take you through some of the statements that Tulsi has made in the past. On Kashmir, she said that it's important as outsiders to understand the complex history of Kashmir, that families were forced to flee and could never return, referring to Kashmiri pundits, adding that all sides must work together in a sovereign country. In 2021, she condemned the attacks on Hindu minorities in Bangladesh, saying that acts of violence betray the fundamental principle of faith. In 2014, Tulsi committed to supporting India's initiative of establishing the International Yoga Day at the United Nations. She's also someone who has spoken often about the Bhagavad Gita, sharing how the COVID years were made easier to deal with as she drew strength from the wisdom of the Gita. Now, while Tulsi Gabbard becomes the first Hindu congresswoman to lead the DNI, she's being criticized by the Democrats for being a turncoat and for her lack of experience in intelligence roles. Let me get this straight across to my guests on the show and understand from them what they think about the criticism that's coming her way, as well as the impact that it's going to have on India. I'm joined by Mr. Vibhuti Jha, former Republican candidate for New York Assembly. I'm also joined by Mr. Pathikrit Pain, geopolitical analyst. Good evening, namaskar to both of you. Good to have you back on Global Mirror. Mr. Vibhuti Jha, let me begin with you. It's great news that a woman has been chosen as the U.S. Intel chief, something that Donald Trump had been criticized for. He's been called a misogynist. He's been called anti-woman. But after Susie Wiles, it is Tulsi Gabbard who is now going to become, a part of Trump Team 2.0. But how do you see this? How do you see the criticism that's coming her way? Democrats saying that she lacks the experience that is needed by a person who's going to be overseeing 18 spy agencies.
Thank you, Shreyaji, for having me here. And good to see Pathikrit, whom I've just recently met. So glad to be with you here, Pathikrit, as well. Listen, this is a classic example of how Mr. Trump breaks through as a Renaissance man in doing things despite the accusation on him of hating women or whatever else is there. So he's proved it again by choosing Tulsi Gabbard to head the DNI, who was until lately a Democrat. And those of you who have not read her book, Why I Left the Democratic Party, I read the book page by page. You will understand how the Democratic Party operates. But having said that, let me add here something very important. The word experience is remarkably overrated. If Tulsi Gabbard, who joined the military to fight against after 9/11, and she's on record saying that she volunteered to be in the force. She has done several tours. She's today Lieutenant Colonel in the Army. She's doing a very special assignment right now, and she has been a congresswoman, a presidential candidate, all right? And she has successfully fought against the military-industrial complex. So she's a truth teller, bold lady who doesn't fight shy from confronting truth. That's the kind of people we need in the political leadership of the country. And when Democratic Party talks about experience, let me just ask, what experience did Kamala Harris have to be the president of the United States? That's nothing. That's what is important. And experience does get overrated. Talent, ability, skills, these all become part of your experience tool. So you can be very aged, like me, have no experience of anything, but a success or a failure depending on how I address the role in my leadership capacity. Why this role is very important? She joined the military to fight the atrocities of terror. 9/11 that happened was a classic example where, despite having, as you rightly mentioned, many intelligence agencies, US intelligence failed to connect the dots. That connecting the dot is not my word. It's a statement made by many people that US intelligence failed to connect the dot. DNI was set up in 2004 to prevent terror and reform intelligence. Now, who else can be more qualified and experienced
Okay.
who has actually handled the whole thing on a first-hand basis? And here is the critical element. If there is any agreement between Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi, and Tulsi is part of that, they agree that international terrorism, whether coming from a religion specific or any act of violence, and I'll be very clear about that. Both of them are very clear on Islamic terrorism that has infested the world today, who use violence as a tool of negotiation.
Yeah.
If there is one person who is capable to fight, it's Tulsi.
In fact, Mr. Jha, she has made some important statements regarding Kashmir, regarding the kind of minority attacks that Bangladesh has witnessed. Pathikrit Pain, there's been a lot of conversation about how Tulsi Gabbard's appointment will impact India. She's seen as somebody who's been a sane voice as far as the Kashmir issue is concerned. She said that, there were several people who were forced to flee their homes. They could never return, and that all stakeholders should come together and work towards a resolution for the Kashmir dispute. Then there was also a statement on the minorities being attacked in Bangladesh. How do you see her appointment really, impacting India as far as India's concerns on, say, the Khalistani elements on American soil are concerned?
Good evening, Shreya, and it's always good to see Vibhuti ji. Thank you to him for his nice words. See, frankly speaking, let me tell you this. Just because Tulsi Gabbard is not the favorite of the Sino-Wahhabi woke Marxist maniacs does not make her less capable. She is extremely against military interventionism. She had called out Obama for not criticizing Islamic extremism. But at the same time, let me tell you this. Tulsi Gabbard will be the Director of National Intelligence for United States. So she would keep the American interest foremost, and there is absolutely no problem with that. What India is looking from United States, Trump administration, and possibly even from her is this. We are looking for integrity. We are not looking for loyalty. Why I say the word integrity is this. I mean, when something hits United States, the United States administration then tells to the rest of the world that this is war on terror, either you are with us or against us. But when somebody threatens Indian aviation sector sitting in the United States, that cannot be called activism. That is plain and simple terrorism. And that's where Biden administration, the way they have dealt with the issue of Gurpatpan Singh Pannu and his constant threats to India's critical infrastructure, and the way the FBI director comes up and says that they will do everything to protect the constitutional rights of someone like Pannu. I mean, that was hypocrisy. Secondly, on the issue of Bangladesh, you had an organization, an extremist organization called Hizbut Tahrir. I mean, Muhammad Yunus introduces somebody from that organization right in front of the Clintons and Biden, and they were okay with it. So you cannot have this double standard that you are against terrorism, but you're okay with this kind of extremism with holding whose hand you do regime change games. So I think from India, India is looking for 3-4 things. Number one, we do not want these regime change experiments to go around. Number two, if you are against terrorism, then you must be against all kinds of terrorism. You cannot have double standards on that. Number three, if we are a strategic partner of United States, then please respect the value and the traits of that relationship. You cannot have a situation where the Department of Defense was having cooperation, extremely deep cooperation with India, but at the same time, the State Department was using UCICRF and other NGOs and indexes and everything to criticize India, to pin down the government, to call India a majoritarian state. Those are not acceptable. So I think this is what we are looking for Tulsi Gabbard. Please take care of the American interest, but it is in America's interest to have a stable, strong India, because we are one of their most trusted strategic partners, which will continue to have its own strategic autonomy. Back to you.
Sure. I think very important points, Pathikrit, that you made as far as the priorities of this government should be and are expected to be, the alleged involvement in regime change and all of that. Perhaps that now will shift. And Trump is being called transactional, which leader isn't transactional. We will think about our own interests first. But Mr. Jha, a lot of critics of Tulsi Gabbard also say that she's been an apologist for the Russian President Vladimir Putin. She was an apologist for Assad as well. And how, she's taken that stance that the United States shouldn't be directly involved in that war, and that, the U.S. involvement basically shouldn't be as much as it was under the Biden and Kamala administration in these two wars, whether it was the Russia-Ukraine war or the Israel-Hamas war. How do you see that really moving forward now that Tulsi Gabbard has been appointed as the intel chief? Because a lot of people are criticizing her for being against American interests.
I don't think she was ever against American interests. As Pathikrit rightly pointed out, she is the director of NIA here in the US to protect US interests. And remember one thing, when she was attacked for her words about Putin and Russia, that was the leftist media played it up in that fashion. What is important to bear in mind that Trump social media tool is called Truth Social. The word truth got into the American system thanks to Vivek Ramaswamy, who made truth as his moniker for his campaign. And as we all know, we have our own word called Satyameva Jayate. And here is an issue that brings all these elements together. This is very critical. Now we know that the entire Russian collusion hoax that was put up by Hillary Clinton's dossier, famous dossier, we know it is false. We know so many intelligence agencies misrepresented. Instead of, if I can't call a lie, they did misrepresent that Russia collusion videotape of Hunter Biden was a Russian implant, misinformation. There were a lot of accusations, and I want to quote here something which Stephen Cohen had said. Stephen Cohen was one of the leading Russian experts who has advised almost all presidents in the United States on US-Russia relationship. I had met him because we had honored him in a forum because he wrote a book, and he said something truly remarkable in Los Angeles, where I was there too, that I'm a New Yorker and I don't like Trump. But I do know one thing for sure. This man ends up telling the truth about Russia-US relationship. These are Stephen Cohen's words in a forum. And he said that when he says that United States and Russia must talk, is absolutely open for anybody with even the slightest of intentions or intelligence, that Russia and the United States are the most powerful nuclear armed countries. They both can destroy each other. So instead of getting into a conflict situation, it's always good to have a talk. And he was appreciative of Trump's efforts to normalize conversations with Russia. Stephen Cohen, he's no more, unfortunately. Otherwise, his book on Russia thing was remarkable. I have read that book. So I'm telling you this element that Russian relationship needs to change without the directional or compulsions of the only military alliance in the world called NATO. Thank you.
Pathikrit, there's a lot of talk about how Tulsi Gabbard is also the first Hindu congresswoman to be taking this position and all of that, and, how it's going to impact India. But do you think there will be some sort of influence, some sort of soft corner when she's dealing with issues that matter to the Hindu community, not just in, the United States, but, say for Bangladesh, they've also talked about and protested against the kind of violence that they have been, subjected to?
Well, Shreya, let me put it this way. I would rather look at it this way, that if, as and when United States shows concerns for minorities of any country, where persecution happens, then you cannot bracket the minorities by a particular religion, which has often happened. You would have a lot of sympathy, the Americans, for the Syrians, or you would have sympathy for the Christian minorities in Lebanon, but you will not do anything about what is happening in Bangladesh or what has consistently happened in case of Pakistan or in Afghanistan. For a long period of time, the persecution of Hindus happened in Pakistan, including that of Christians. But the United States turned a blind eye because they needed, the nuisance called Pakistan for its utility for other purpose. We would rather expect that this government, and that's the reason there's optimism about Trump administration, particularly Tulsi Gabbard. We are not saying that, okay, from henceforth, do the opposite, only be concerned about the Hindus and no one else. We are saying, and we expect, that if there is persecution without looking at religion, go ahead and take care of them. What is happening in Bangladesh and the sheer inaction, incompetence on the border, complicity of the Biden administration has been awful. On the contrary, you would see the Hindu community, wherever they go, including those in the United States, have always traditionally been the most law-abiding. Just because they are not into organized violence, just because they do not retaliate, just because they do not take revenge by any kind of bombing, does not mean that you take them for granted and never take care of their interests. We are only saying this, that please take care of all minorities irrespective of religion. It cannot be that the world consistently, including the United Nations, continue to ignore what is happening in Bangladesh and then give grand lectures on India just because India brought in CAA to what? To actually save those persecuted minorities, including Christians and not just Hindus, in those countries neglected by the US State Department for decades. So we are looking for equanimity. We are looking for equality, not any partiality.
Okay. Mr. Vibhuti, quickly before I wrap up, I want to digress a little bit from what we're talking about and actually talk about how, there's been talk about how this Trump presidency will be extremely awful and there are fears and all of that in place. But look at what Donald Trump has been doing in the past few days. Like I said at the start of the show, he's been called a misogynist and an anti-woman, but he's appointed Susie Wiles. Now he's appointed Tulsi Gabbard. Clearly, perhaps the world is being too early in judging Donald Trump 2.0 this time around.
Absolutely. You are absolutely on the money when you say that the world has been unfair to Trump. And that was one of the reasons why he got such a big mandate. In 2016 to 2020 term of his, all the accusations that were hurled on him, political ones, were untrue. The fact that he is a misogynist is also proven false. He's not anti-woman at all. Think about it from this perspective, that he has been bold enough to embrace people from other party, and that to a Hindu woman. So Tulsi Gabbard's, I'm very proud of her, as a matter of fact, that Vivek and Tulsi have single-handedly displayed their Hindu character, the Hindu values, right on their sleeve, and confronted everybody with those values. They are not anti-anyone. They are pro-Hindu, pro those values. And to that end, as Pathikrit said, and I totally agree with you, I don't expect you to do me a favor. I expect you to be fair. And that fairness, India must expect from Tulsi's coming to that position. So all the accusations about Trump being who he is, the evil he is proven wrong. He is little, if only he were a little savvy like Bill Clinton and Obama with his choice of words, he would go down much more successfully. Otherwise, he will be taken apart by the left media for what he says. And words matter. That's what is critical for him to understand.
Mr. Jha, we can't completely give him a clean chit. Considering his past record, but certainly we can give him that benefit of doubt and an opportunity this time around for what he's saying and for, his actions matching his words, because that is Donald Trump, quintessential Donald Trump, being, just the favorite of the media and the world. Let's see how this Trump presidency goes about. I'll have to leave it there. Mr. Vibhuti Jha and Pathikrit Pain, thank you very much to both of you gentlemen for joining us on Global Mirror and sharing your perspectives. Namaskar. With that, viewers, let's shift